Hello, my name is Ramis Tikawi. I am a former teacher. I taught high school English and social studies. Now I'm an entrepreneur, business owner, and the host of the Legendary Educator Podcast. My favorite teacher when I was a student, well, I had three. I had Mr. Evans, who was my music teacher. I had Miss Tappy, who was my science teacher. And I had Miss Hurley, who was my English and social studies teacher. Not only was she my favorite teacher, but she was also my inspiration to become a teacher and basically opened up the door for me. I became a history and social studies teacher probably because of her. I don't think that was a coincidence. My style of teaching is very close to hers. My dry humor and sarcasm are pretty much copy-paste. So yeah, I think she was the reason, or a big factor of the reason why I became a teacher. Hello there, fellow teachers from around the world, and welcome to the Legendary Educator Podcast. I'm your host, Ramis Tikawi, and this is episode 1, the introduction. We begin how every teacher should begin their teaching season, with the classroom rules. So let's jump right in. Rule number 1. On this podcast, we'll be using our teacher names. So from now on, I'm just Mr. Ramis. Rule number 2. Legendary educators are supposed to lead by example and be role models to their students. And since this is a family show, there will be no bad, rude, vulgar, or offensive language of any kind. We're going to keep it cool, we're going to keep it clean, and we're going to keep it positive. Rule number 3. When guests come on the show, and yes, there will be guests, they will always begin by answering a couple of questions to introduce themselves. Rule number 4. On every episode of this podcast, we will aim to give you at least one valuable piece of knowledge to help you become a legendary educator. So keep listening. Now that we've listed the rules and set the tone, coming up, who is this podcast for? We'll be right back. Welcome back. Now that we've set the tone, let's get to know our audience. If you're listening to me right now, you're probably a teacher, or at least someone who works with children. And if that's the case, you're definitely in the right place. This podcast is for teachers. All teachers. New teachers who are still trying to figure out their style and technique. Still nervous about stepping into the classroom. Veteran teachers who have been teaching for years, who might want to update, upgrade, or modernize their teaching methodology. And some teachers who just have a couple of persistent challenges that they'd like to overcome. A big one, for example, is behavior and classroom management. There are things that can be challenging for some teachers, and that would greatly affect the learning outcome. Because that's the point, isn't it? Our main goal as teachers, what we strive for every day, is the learning of our students. You can be a good teacher, going through the motions, getting through all the content in your textbooks, using your slideshows and visual aids. But if your students aren't actually learning, then are you actually teaching? When we return, I'll be introducing the subject matter of our podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back. If you're still listening, good for you. This means that my voice hasn't completely turned you off, and that you're serious about learning and improving your teaching. I appreciate that, and so will your students. And because you're striving to become a legendary educator, please join me every Monday for a new episode, where we'll be discussing different topics, tips, and skills in order to help you reach your teaching goals. As I said, this podcast is for teachers, and while teachers are usually the unsung heroes of every person's life, they are just regular people like you or me. Likewise, my guests on the podcast will also be regular people. There will be no celebrities or politicians here. I'll be speaking to other teachers, psychologists, counselors, administrators, even students and parents, so that we can find out what makes a legendary educator. So please join me on this educational journey if you want to learn how you can also be a legendary educator. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you have questions, comments, or complaints, or to get in touch with me, you can find me on social media at Legendary Educator or at legendaryeducator.com. You can also find full interviews with my guests on my YouTube channel, Legendary Educator. Thank you for taking the time to join me on this journey. I will talk to you next week. Class dismissed.